Hello, hello, hello. Good morning. It is Friday morning, and that means you are back with the IDP Pro Manager podcast. I am Kraig, and with me, as always, is Gary, the IDP tipster himself. Gary, it's been a busy morning for you. How's Friday feeling for you?
It's been chaotic, man. Chaotic this morning, but we're ready to roll, man. Let's get this rookie coverage going.
Yeah, we sort of alluded to it last week, and we are diving into rookies this week and next week, the 2 weeks before the NFL draft. Of course, 2 weeks from now, day one, that Thursday night will already be done, and we'll be sort of going into what happened on that day one. But we're going to give you the insight that we have into some of these IDP rookies coming up. We're going to be this show and next week going over some of the bigger names, probably guys taken in the first 2 rounds, we're thinking, to give you some insight on those guys that may end up mattering, at least would have the more likely chance of mattering for your leagues in season one for those rookies. And a lot of these guys are going to be bigger names you've probably heard of. Of course, the first one off the top is probably going to be the first rookie taken in the actual NFL draft this year as far as defensive players. It's Will Anderson Jr. from Alabama. He's an edge rusher, probably going to end up being more of a 3-4 outside linebacker. He's 6'4", about 253. Good ratings over at PFF throughout his career, but especially last year. Pretty much as far as what you want from an outside linebacker against the run, against the rush. He did not do testing. Now, you're going to see this for some of these guys, some of these bigger names, as far as not doing testing at Pro Day or Combine. But when you watch him on tape, he knows how to get around and get to the quarterback. He has great stats throughout his career there at Alabama, and really is just one of the couple big names for IDP rookies coming in here. He was the number 17 overall prospect in the 2020 high school recruiting class. He just won all sorts of awards this past year. The Lombardi Award. He was a unanimous All-American, first team All-SEC, SEC Defensive Player of the Year, Bronco Nagurski Trophy winner in 21 and 22, and he won the Czech Bednardik Award and the Lott Trophy in 2022. That's a lot of 22s, and he's going to end up being 22 for this season. So, Gary, this is one of the big names pretty much everyone's heard of going into the draft. What do you know about him, and what do you like about him here?
Well, I kind of put him on there as like a Micah Parsons, kind of prototype. I think we have some prototypes that's coming in that are where we were getting linebacker / safety types like Jeremy Chin and stuff, which we still are, right? But they're also kind of evolving some of these edge rushers like Parsons and such, and we're getting these kinds of players that can be linebacker / edge rushers. Now that's not unusual, but we're normally talking about outside linebackers, these big 6'8" guys, 300 pounds, whatever, bending it off the edge. Well, maybe not that big, but I'm talking Micah Parsons is more inside linebacker / edge rusher. So I like him as that profile. I think it really depends where he lands at, But I mean, he is definitely probably the best proven top prospect in this draft. Very interested in this guy right here.
Yeah, in 3 years, he had 204 combined tackles, 58 and a half tackles for a loss, and 34 and a half sacks at Alabama. Now, of course, that's an overall great defense. But the fact of the matter is he's giving a huge production for you at the college level. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. But again, I'm expecting him easily to it's always so hard with the quarterbacks. He should easily go in the top 10, and I do expect him to be the first defensive player taken in the draft.
No. He's, from what I've seen, he's being compared to Derek Thomas, another Alabama great. And I mean, they don't throw that around lightly. I don't normally see that thrown around lightly. I don't see it thrown around lightly about anybody being compared to Derek Thomas very often. And the only landing spots that I don't like, well, actually, I guess the only way that I think that he won't be of value is if, say, he landed somewhere that don't need edge rushers and they have veteran guys that are playing the inside linebacker. We see a Nakobe Dean kind of situation. And I think that would be a far miss to think that would happen again. There's not too many teams pulling, going that way. So That'd be very interesting. Is there any spots that you would really like to see him land?
I mean, if you're looking at sort of the top part of the draft where people are looking at the him going, I gotta pull up because they're always saying I don't have the draft order even memorized here.
Right,
But
right.
Carolina's not taking them; they're taking their quarterback. Everyone's sort of
Mhm.
saying that they think the Houston's taking a quarterback. That makes sense too with being up that high in the quarterback class here. If
Mhm.
Arizona stays at 3, I mean that's a potential landing spot for them, which is interesting with what they're doing and how Jonathan Gannon uses those sort of edge rushers. He switches up between the 3-4-4-3 with how he employs
Mhm.
them. We saw that last year with that great defensive line and Hassan Reddick. So could be an interesting spot there, but it really just is going to leave me with question marks if he goes to a team that's going to want him to put his hand in the dirt and use him that way.
Yeah. It'd be wild to see the Lions somehow get a hold of him and pair him with Hutchinson. Man, that'd be devastating, right?
Yeah, we'll have to see if he falls that
Oh,
far.
yeah. All right. Cool.
All right.
The SGPN Fantasy Football Podcast now offers rewards for every episode listened to and downloaded on Spotify. Tune in every episode to answer a posted Q&A question, earn DGen points. This month, SGPN Fantasy Football is giving away a $50 gift card. Go to Spotify and join in on the fun.
Kick off spring with new gear built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered from the sun to the slopes with premier polarized shades, customizable snow goggles, and much more. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that offers a world-class product that's just as good as any expensive pair we've worn. Durable frames and extremely clear optics for outdoor adventures. And that's not all. Shady Rays offers the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair of sunglasses is backed by lost and broken replacements. If you lose or break your pair, even on day 1, they told us they will send you a brand new pair, no questions asked. Wear your Shady Rays with confidence because they have your back long after you purchase. With Shady Rays, you can look and feel good. To date, they have donated over 20 million meals to fight hunger with Feeding America. And if you don't love them, exchange them for a new pair or return them for free within 30 days. There's no risk when you shop with Shady Rays. Their team always has your back. And great news, exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the new year. Go to shadyrays.com and use code SGPN for 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 200,000 people. Also, make sure to check out our NBA Playoff Survivor Challenge. Completely free to enter, and the winner gets $250 cash and a $100 SGPN gift card, exclusively on the SGPN app. All right, Gary, we're going to get back into some of these rookies here. Next up, another edge player that is super interesting to me, Tyree Wilson. He had 1 year at Texas A&M, 3 years at Texas Tech, and he is a huge boy. You were talking about some of these
Mhm.
larger guys earlier. He's like 6'6", 271 pounds, but when you watch him on the field, he can move. He isn't just one of these old, days of you are lumbering defensive ends that are just out there eating up blocks, not doing a whole lot else. The guy can move. He did not do athletic testing either, the Pro Day Combine, because he is having, or he had by now, surgery removed from his foot from a prior surgery. But the doctor said it was just, they don't want you sweating in an open cut and all that sort of stuff for risk of infection. So he didn't test. But when you watch him out there, he's just something else. And he was a first team All Big 12 player this past year, and he was first team All American. He has pretty good, scores across run and rush. Uh, he probably does need to add some more, functional strength because of how big of a frame that is. He could add some more on there. So I don't think you see that with a lot of these guys in college when they get to these NFL level weight rooms and conditioning programs. They're going to add on muscle and go through that. And he probably needs to do that. But I love the way that he moves around the field. Again, it's just a question of how is he going to get used at that NFL level? Because his body gives you more of a defensive end vibe, but that's not what he did at college. He was more of a stand-up guy.
Yeah, he's like the prototype of any defensive end in that base or an outside rusher like he is. You gotta love it. The vibe I get is Cameron Haywood. That's the kind of, that's really the vibe I get off of this guy. And I think it's really going to matter whether or not what system he does land in. If he's an interior defensive end type guy, playing an interior rusher with an outside linebacker or another rusher on the outside of him, I love him just as much as what I would as being a defensive guy, because I seen a video of this dude's dunking a basketball. Okay, now granted, it looked like maybe like early college or high school, so he probably wasn't quite as big as he is right now, but it was still huge. I mean, so he's got the athleticism, he's got the arm reach, he's got the quickness. He's just got a little bit more refining to do, but he is definitely somebody landing in the right spot, right situation. Say somebody like Philadelphia, which I know Jamal Carter's name is going around or something, but I could see somebody taking advantage of this kind of cross thing, and putting him inside as a defensive tackle and just letting him go to town. I could see that, but it really depends on the team's needs. But I do like this guy. I do. I like him a lot.
And he's another guy projected to go in the top half of the first round for most mock drafts out there. Of course, when we're talking projections, you can go out there and find anything. You could find probably CJ Stroud dropping in someone's mock draft. Anyone can do them. But when we're talking about sort of the consensus of the experts and the people that do this for a living, he's another guy that's right up there in the top half of the first round. Another guy that's ranked way up there. And for my money, if I had to put someone on as like the best just pure NFL prospect based on talent, it's probably Jalen Carter, the next guy here. He's not getting the same buzz for a couple of reasons we'll get into, but one of them is the fact that he's just a defensive tackle. And we know for even IDP leagues, what we're talking about, generally speaking, defensive tackles aren't going to get you as much in terms of production. Now, that's been changing over the past few years. You're seeing guys, break out and do more of it with your Forrest Buckners, Jeffrey Simmons, Aaron Donald. You're always going to find some of them. But generally speaking, the defensive ends do more for you in IDP than the cumulative defensive tackles. But Jalen Carter is one of those guys who could break that mold. And just based on pure talent, he is something else. He had, I think, the highest ratings as far as PFF across the board for the rookies that we're going to be talking about here. And even on that vaunted Georgia defense, he was able to be productive. Just in the past 2 years, which was where he spent most of his playing time, because in 2020, of course, the college was shortened. He had 15.5 tackles for a loss, 6 sacks, and then he had 69 tackles. It's pretty good production from a defensive tackle on a team that's just loaded with talent. And he got those sort of accolades, too, for doing that. He was a first-team All-SEC and unanimous All-American in 2022.
Yeah,
He is interesting case just because of the baggage that he has around him, though, Gary.
Right. I like him a lot, too, but I got to be honest, and I'm going to tell everybody is, I don't bullshit about things, but or lie about IDP, try to shoot from the hip just to sound smart about it. So, but the one thing that I do know is I'm not a big fan of the fact that he can't get into the quarterback. He's a great gap guy. He's quick. He's fast. He's big. He's just a developmental type dude right now. And this is not somewhere when we're talking defensive tackle, even though the scarcity of this, the only way that I'm interested in him in the first string, which I am, is that defensive tackle. If it's a DL play, I'm really not. He's going to slide down the board on me. So I'm just going to mention that because some of you might be catching some of my SGPN articles coming out about the rookies. So he's coming out this coming week on this next one for us. But either way, I love Carter. It's kind of like last year. You want an example of my skepticism, I guess, when it comes to IDP. One, look at last year's class. Logan Hall or Logan, whatever the guy down there in Tampa Bay. There was numerous ones, Davis, whatever. The defensive tackles, a lot of love. Got nothing out of any of them last year whatsoever as in IDP and really playing time. All right. So I don't think that Carter is Quentin Williams, Jonathan Allen, any of these guys. All right. And all these dudes that I just mentioned, and I can name probably if I look more, I know for sure more. They don't produce that well their first year. They're defensive tackles. They come in, they're first rounders. They're really great guys. They're beasts. They're beasts right now. They're unstoppable, but it takes time to develop. And they already came into the system or into the NFL with pass rush abilities. So with Carter struggling a little bit and only getting 3 sacks a week or a year or something, and not that many tackles for loss the first year. And to tell you the truth, he did have a really nice boost on the tackles for loss in his this past year. But in college, that could be so easily done just catching that running back, right? That makes me wonder. I didn't look that deep into it, but I'm not that impressed. And when you look at everything across the board, he's just got some development to do, and I don't expect him to be up here where I'm going to be looking this year.
If it's a defensive tackle specifically, like I said, I'm very interested in him. I think part of you see him just constantly get pressure, and sometimes that's more important at the college level is that are you able to consistently get back there? Because we've seen that with guys at the NFL, even like Leonard Williams. He was a guy that was getting tons of pressure early in his career and just wasn't getting home. And then they got him into the right system. And they were with the Giants, and he started getting home. They figured it out with him. And I think you can do that. It's those guys that aren't able to, consistently generate pressure. The bigger concerns I have for Jalen Carter are sort of, maturity and conditioning stuff. There were games where he started to lose steam when he was out there full time. And then, he got into that situation legally. That's been resolved. It seems like teams are looking past that now. But he's also only taking top 10 visits, for the NFL draft, which says, all right, maybe he's sure and betting on himself, but that can rub teams the wrong way too. And it just how he fits in with a team personality wise may end up mattering a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is heating up for March Madness. College Pick'em is a great way to get in on the action, especially if your bracket is busted as of day one, like mine. Plus, Underdog Fantasy has your favorite college basketball player props. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code SGPN.
And as always, we also want to thank you all for watching us live on YouTube at the SGPN Fantasy site for YouTube. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button while you're watching. Like our video on YouTube every time you catch us. We would appreciate it, and we want to thank you again for watching us today. Gary, we're going to be sort of sticking. You see, there's a trend here with a lot of these are edge or defensive line guys. The edge is one of the clear strengths in this draft class, and there's another one too that I don't think we're going to touch on really anyone from, which is the cornerbacks, just because of the nature of the cornerbacks go and how they end up producing for us. But those are sort of the two really big areas as far as strength on defense, or the edge rushers and cornerbacks. Another guy,
IDP value. Value. That's what we're looking for. Positional scarcity and a player that can fill it.
And edge, we're looking here. Next one up is Nolan Smith. He was the number one overall prospect in the 2019 high school recruiting class, and he's going to be 22 this year, so he's still young. He spent 4 years at Georgia, about 6'3", 236 pounds. And one of the things that I really liked about him for fantasy production, he didn't necessarily have all of that tackles for loss and sacks that you'd think from an edge guy. Whether or not he's an edge guy at the NFL level or a linebacker remains to be seen. But he does great against the run, which is something you don't necessarily see out of a lot of these edge guys. That's usually the area they have to work on. You're like, oh, yeah, they're great at getting pressure, but what do? He is as strong as an ox. He can hold up against blocks. He can shed blocks, and he's good against the run on tape, which is I loved seeing. The numbers weren't all there, in part because of injuries. Like this past year, he ended his season late October because of pec tear. That's the reason he didn't do a lot of the testing. But you can see on the field, the athleticism was off the charts with the guy. When he did end up doing the testing as far as the pro day, I think it was like a 9.24. If you check out the relative athletics score, which you can football, great thing that they put out there. The explosion, the speed is just off the charts. He's just a little bit undersized for an edge guy in today's NFL, but kind of makes him a tweener there, Gary. Do you like that? With having that versatility, do you think that ends up hurting them?
Well, we're getting close to where I'm losing interest in guys, but I'm definitely not losing interest in. If I have to say, Will Anderson is a Micah Parsons prototype, well, I'm going to say same thing about Nolan Smith. Light in this class, just a little bit smaller. That's all it is. Same guys, same kind of profiles, quick, edgy, got it going. Landing spot's going to be sweet. This kid's going to get an opportunity. We're just going to have to wait this out. But I'm putting those two in the same category. It's just we have talked about them in the order that I would be interested in more than likely, because I'm leaning Anderson is leaning more edge rusher of that hybrid. And when we look at Nolan Smith, because of his lighter size at the moment, we're just looking at a more of an inside linebacker edge rusher on the second side. So, just a little hair splitting there for me right now. And it's fantasy, I'm trying.
Yeah. And, to the point, a lot of these guys aren't going to have that immediate impact year one. Most of these guys are going to get out on the field. They're going to get shots, whether it's part of a rotation because of injuries. There's a lot of different things. But
I think we've lost him. But yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. And I also want to mention, if you want to check out that Jamal Carter slamming the basketball, I was just checking my article, and it will be in this coming coverage. Anyways, all right. So I think I might have lost my partner, and he usually comes in about now, but we'll see here. I will now attempt to take over the bus and try not to crash this. So I'm going to finish up here, or we're going to go on here with Miles Murphy, Clemson edge, 79 overall, 72.8 run, 78.5 rush. And that's a good sign. He might return, won't it? But anyways, Miles Murphy. Let's schematics about weight and everything else. This is another prototype defensive end. Definitely a guy that I would like to see land somewhere. He needs some development, but he is closer to being ready than he is not being ready. Let's see. It wouldn't be surprising if somebody would take him kind of like the Sam Williams guy, Sam Williams edge rusher for 49ers last year, a little bit later, maybe as a backup behind a couple of veterans. All right. But if he lands that sweet spot, if he can get somewhere like the Bears or somewhere, I like him a lot more for Dynasty than I do redraft. Let's see. I am left dry today, folks. Ain't I? All right. Everybody having a good time. Come on, bombard me. Let me see what's up. All right. Def Leppard. Yeah. Thanks, Justin Mark. Hey, come on in the studio. I need a host. Anybody out there? All right. Nah. All right. Don't need a host. Just prefer a host because I'm not very good at this. Let's see. So now that I got my train of thought back, we're going to move on. I'm not shy. So let's talk about someone that I feel more comfortable about. Y'all know I don't do that much about rookies, and I'm in the process of going through them now. So come on. You're doing great, man. Thanks, Justin. You fucking liar. Oh, excuse me. You liar. All right. So did I mention that there's going to be a post? You can see his Jamal Carter dump. Yeah, it's coming out this next week. All right. So now that I got my shit. Brian Branch. All right. This is another guy. I like him for first string. He's been Nick Saban's defensive army knife. I mean, he's just one of those guys that fits that molds. We have a few of them coming out occasionally. Saban's got a hell of a defense down there. That's what Alabama is known for. What's impressive, he had less than a 3.2 missed tackle rate. I mean, with the Tide, that's outstanding. If you could get that in the NFL from a defensive back, that's elite. I mean, that's up there. Now, is that going to be possible in the NFL? No. Now, Branch, the way that he profiles is he is a great player. He's a good player. I'm going to also mention a couple of other good Alabama safeties that came out, and as Xavier McKinney. And I don't think Branch is necessarily as good as Xavier McKinney on paper at the moment, but landing at the right team is it's probably going to nail it for him. I could see this guy being the best safety in the class, and I think that the tier between him and the next class is down a little bit personally. When it comes to Branch, though, I do expect him. I don't expect him to go super high. I don't think it's going to be the situation. I think it's just like fantasy football and NFL put together, when it comes to defensive backs. Yeah, if you're elite, you're probably you're gonna go. But if you're not elite, then you're just gonna slide because there's a lot of you out there, just like there is in fantasy football on the fantasy football waiver wire. And I'm gonna collect my thoughts and let you check this out.
Morning. Nothing like waking up to crying kids, hungry pets, and an angry alarm clock. All a football fan wants is to get your kids to school, feed the dogs, and clock in at the office, and then you can finally settle in and enjoy a moment of peace with your morning cup of coffee. And you are just in time for the SGPN IDPro Manager Podcast, nice, which your idiot league mates haven't yet discovered. Ha! Let Brad, Kraig, and Gary start your day with all the reliable IDP information you need. Money. Tune in every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern on the SGPN Fantasy Football.
Alrighty, not having a good day with nothing.
Fact. The National Breast Cancer Foundation reports that a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer every 2 minutes. And we already know finding new innovations in research, surgical options, and clinical trials is essential to finding a cure. And to all those fantasy football ladies that may be listening, we also know with early detection your survival rate goes up. And that's why breast self-exams are very important, and the best way to give your old girls their best fighting chance to win the championship. So, with all that being said, the fellas here at the IDPro Players Pod would like to remind everyone, the National Breast Cancer Foundation does take donations, so please, go and give what you can. And let's give our mothers, our wives, our sisters, and every woman, the support, the resources, and maybe even more importantly, the hope, by knowing we all really do care.
We're going to keep rolling here. We're going to fight through this. It's been a while since I've done this by myself, and I am on it. So we're going to talk, what's his name? Lucas Van Ness, the guy from, I believe, Iowa, known as Hercules amongst his college friends. All right, the guy is a physical specimen, and you ever see a picture of this guy's six-pack for supposedly being a defensive lineman type? It's pretty ridiculous, I mean, he's pure bodybuilder linebacker looking. If he hasn't changed that since the pictures that I've seen him last year. Anyhow, the guy is just really known as a beast. He's a special teams guy. He's got great technique. But there's something wrong because there still has to be a lot of work there, considering his weight and everything that goes with it. And he distracted me because I'm glad to have you back. I was just talking about Ness, or kind of stumbling through it. But great to have you in there. So I am just going to stop there, and I'll let you know. Let's see, who did I talk about, folks? Murphy. But I bet they'd love to hear your thoughts. Uh-oh. That internet's not working with us today, brother. Yeah, all right.
Yeah,
there we go.
I don't know what's going on. I'm the only one home here, and said it was cutting out. So,
that's cool.
Lucas Van Ness is his nickname is Hercules at the program in Iowa. He's one of my favorite guys. Nickname for him out there, the Luke Ness Monster. I worked with a couple other people out there. Just fantastic nickname too. So hopefully he catches on. He's got great size. He's still growing into the role. He really only has that 1 year of good production. But he comes from a good program there in Iowa that's produced a lot of NFL talent. He's got great strength. Probably needs to work on, his pass rushing a little bit. But if you want to talk about a 4-3 defensive end guy, he's a guy that I really like that flew up draft boards. And Myles Murphy's a guy, he was a very high prospect coming out of high school. He's had good production pretty much all 3 years there at Clemson. Again, he's probably going to be a 4-3 defensive end, although he does have some wiggle room. They might be able to put him up as a stand-up guy if he, drops a little weight, and they still think he's going to be able to be fluid enough for that. And out of the edge guys, the big edge guys you think of as a defensive end, Murphy had the best coverage score. He was like a 71.5 with PFF in college, which makes you think maybe he could stand that transition to a 3-4 sort of outside linebacker. But again, two more guys that are probably going in the first round, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them in the top 20 picks. All right. Well, we're going to do one more here quick since my computer's still loading up. And we're going to go to safety, Gary. The only safety we're talking about here, Brian Branch, a do-it-all guy that just had great ratings across the board at Alabama. He can play many different positions. He's super versatile in terms of being able to cover, run defense, play cornerback. I don't even know if there's a safety that will for sure go in the first round this year, but if it is, it's going to be Brian Branch. And he's really the only guy that I think if he goes somewhere, he's kind of guaranteed a shot at a starting job. But how did you feel about him, given he's really the only safety we're talking about today?
Yeah, and exactly. I didn't know that for sure, but I did know he's the only one I'm really interested in. He's in a kind of a tier of his own here. You know, he's in a tier above the rest of the safeties. So I think that he'll probably be the main target, and he'll probably land a starting gig. Everybody else on this list we'll probably be talking about next week. If there's any of them that you have for us, then they could too. It's not out of the question. It's just a matter of where you land and how things go during the draft. I really what I wanted to say about Ness though. I started to, and I was on mute, so you rolled on, dog. Thank you. Hey, but that's cool. I just wanted to mention the rest of Ness. I think he's going to be more of a special teamer this first year. I don't know if we're going to see this kid. I mean, he might be taken high in the draft. Just be careful there because the guy has some development, and he wasn't a starter last year technically for Iowa.
Yeah, he wasn't a starter in name. He played over like 600 some snaps or something like that. So he's out there a ton. But that's the other thing, for IDP managers out there. Don't just look at who's listed as the starter. Pay attention to those snap counts to get sort of that true value, because there are some guys that start that don't end up playing the majority of snaps for whatever reason. So it works both ways.
Yep, sure does.
Ever notice these days how things have changed with sports entertainment? Suddenly everyone is edgy and they don't mind offending people with offensive words. It's everywhere. Podcasts, to radio, to primetime TV. All I want are NFL defensive player reports, maybe a quick update on the best streaming corners, and yet I have to hear about the dirty O. That's right, offensive player discussions and hot takes blocking my path to the sweet, sweet defensive information I need.
Bullshit.
That was until I found the IDPro Players Podcast. And now, unless the IDP pros John or Gary mess up, I know I'm not going to be offended by their no dirty O approach.
Damn.
So take my word for it. Catch the sports gambling IDP Pro Player Podcast every week and leave the dirty O behind. So if you or someone you know has an IDP degenerate problem, that's terrific. And the fantasy move to make is to go follow a couple of the best veterans in the fantasy football industry. That was on Twitter at I, D, P, RO. One word at the IDP Pro Players Pod.
Oh, yeah.
So this next guy, Gary, is a guy that I really liked going into this process and into this year, and he's probably not going to be someone that's overly exciting year one. We talked about those sort of interior defensive linemen. Bryan Bresee really fits into that. He was the number one overall prospect coming out of high school in 2020. ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year, all ACC first team. His first year stats even were great there at Clemson. Fortunately, he's had some stuff come up. He had to have surgery. He's gotten banged up. He had to duck out for family issues, which there's no harm in that at all. We understand that, but he just doesn't have a ton of playing time to where he's been able to grow in what I think he could be. Physically, athletically, he's awesome. He's like 6'5", 300 pounds, something like that. And the guy can move. He can move side to side. He can get back in the pocket. Just doesn't have a ton of experience, which worries me because trying to learn that on the fly at the NFL level doesn't always work. And as you spoke about sort of Jalen Carter, defensive tackles, unless it's a DT premium league or we have to start one, generally aren't going to be that enticing. So I'm hopeful for him for a long term in the NFL, but year one and even year two, probably, I don't think you're getting a lot out of him.
This is about where writing in articles that I tried to help standard league managers and start explaining to them that, we do love defensive tackles if they're the top 2%, because that's about the only thing that really matters in DL leagues. leagues with DLs and standard size. It's just the fact of it. So my personal opinion, I already was off Carter just for the facts of, he's not Jonathan Allen or somebody like that in that kind of a profile for me. I'm not going anywhere with this kid you're talking about, Bresee.
Yep.
I did look into him enough, but it just I stopped. You should be going, if you're in a rookie draft right now and you've gotten this far down, unless you have like 60 guys on your roster, and believe me, folks, people do this.
Oh yeah.
In very, very deep leagues. So, and you could have 25, 30 IDP on there. If you're in something like that, sure, go right ahead. Get in the last couple of rounds. But you're wasting your time if you're drafting any kind of rookie like this in a standard league, because here's what you do. You waste your capital that you could have spent on some kind of offensive flyer. And I know it. I'm speaking dirty freaking but go get that. Go get that flyer. Man, I don't give a shit if you don't know. He's going to be the backup to the water boy. I don't care. Get you an offensive guy, stick him on your roster, sit on him through the summer, see how the rookie does. Injuries happen, freak things happen, players break out, boom. All right. Worst case scenario, you're dropping that player, but you almost had a shot at a real high ceiling if you hit or something crazy. And you just drop them and go pick up defensive tackles that you would have gotten. You're going to get better, probably better, a lot better than Bryce. You're going to go in a standard league and go get a solid defensive tackle that you can put in there and not take a zero each week over that. Okay. So I don't know if that kind of twist-tied and tongue-tied, but what I'm telling you is don't waste your draft capital right now on these guys, because I guarantee you about 3 weeks into the season, if they are on one and somebody has them, they're probably going to be right back on the waiver wire until the following season or when they break out.
Yeah, for redraft leagues, a lot of these guys, they're not going to be getting the majority of snaps, even if they're starter in name, like we had mentioned. For redraft, most of these guys aren't going to be worth drafting. If you're drafting now, ahead of the NFL draft for a redraft, to Gary's point, the top 5 that we talked about, top 4, maybe you want to kind of take a look at, but a lot of these other guys just aren't going to be there in terms of value. They're going to be higher up in these, ESPN, Sleeper, whatever it is, website lists, just because people get excited and take rookies early.
Right. And people might be, wondering, well, why in the hell, okay, if Gary's not excited about him, why in the hell are we talking about him? Well, I'm going to be all honest with you folks. It's got to be talked about because these guys are being talked about out in fantasy football. If it wasn't for that and their name being up there in that upper tier section for first string for some other people, we wouldn't be talking about it. So a little different over here at the Manager's Pod.
And some of these guys will end up mattering. It's just we don't have that crystal ball to figure out, hey, this guy's going to get hurt. He's going to get drafted to this team in midseason. He's going to get there and, start to break out or something. We can't tell you that, but we can tell you the names again. Probably the top 2, definitely 3 rounds for I'd bargain all of these guys that we're going over. Those guys are going to get the first shot more often than not in terms of when they have to have a guy to throw in there, whether because of injury, leaving, or just wanting to try something new if someone's not productive.
Yeah. All right. This is where I'm going to come in. I got a question. And before he does these last 3 players, for the simple fact is, folks, again, I'm going to say it. I don't bullshit nobody. I don't pull nothing from the hip. And I'm going to leave it up to the master Kraig on these next guys because I don't know who the hell they are. I'm going to be honest. The rookies, I haven't gotten there. I've been busy. Shoot me. Anyhow, it's been one of those programs. So I just wanted to go ahead and ask you that quick question. What is your overall feel of this draft class?
There's a couple big names, at the top. The big names in particular, just for years, it's Jalen Carter and Will Anderson. There's a number of guys that have stepped up, like you mentioned, really at that edge position where they're going to be defensive ends or outside linebackers that I think you're going to find a lot of long-term value there. And I think you could have a, double-digit guys that make a long-term impact in the NFL. I'm not saying Pro Bowlers, or anything like that, but they're going to be worthy of having on your IDP roster. How many of them, who knows? There's so much that goes into that. And there's maybe 3 or 4 linebackers that I'm really interested in at this point. If they get that draft capital, if they go to a nice spot, I'm really excited for them too. But again, sort of like we talked about safety, I don't think it's guaranteed that we get a linebacker, a true, on-ball linebacker that goes day one, because there's just not a ton of them. And there's so many other like offensive line. There's a ton of depth. There's not any huge star there either, I don't think. But there's a lot of guys that could be in the league a long time that are going to be productive. And you mix that in with quarterbacks, you get the offensive linemen. I think there's going to be a ton of cornerbacks. I think you could see 5, 6 or more cornerbacks go in the first round, which is great. And even for some IDP leagues, like Gary said, standard size leagues, you're probably not playing a cornerback, and especially a rookie. Some cornerbacks are going to value every year. Some you could draft a Jalen Ramsey and be fine every year. If you're happy taking him that high and just getting that production, great. Same thing with some of these other guys. But rookies, it's so hard to predict that. I mean, good luck being able to pick the Sauce Gardner out of every class if there even is one.
Right. And they're luxuries. We keep saying it. As long as you draft these kids, young men, future Hall of Famers, who knows? As long as you draft them expecting luxury, if it works out, then you're good. Don't do it as starters. You're cool. All right, I'm gonna let you roll on, man. I wasn't really impressed with this class though. Overall, I do like that transition that I said. We're seeing Michael Parsons prototypes coming up behind him, kind of here. So I like this. I like that there's more. I like those guys. I like that top 4 or 5, those edge rushers. But other than that, I think in the overall class, it's kind of mediocre, to tell you the truth.
I think it's a deep class in terms of NFL level talent, where the first 4 rounds, even you're not going to have a lot of these guys just wash out and not.
But you're talking NFL. You're talking NFL, brother, ain't you?
Well, I'm talking even long term here. For IDP, it's going to matter because these guys are going to come up and get their chances long term. Year one, no. And even if you look at quote unquote the experts out there, a lot of these guys are saying, there might be 15 to 20 guys that have a round 1 label for the NFL draft. Well, that matters, because if they aren't seeing you at the NFL level as an immediate contributor, then it doesn't matter for IDP because they're not getting that chance. So there is a correlation between how they view it as an NFL player and that chance that you get for our purposes in IDP. So are a lot of these guys going to get that chance year one to even have an opportunity to break up? Probably not, and that's what matters for us. But if you switch into a little bit of a dynasty perspective, I think there's a lot of guys that could end up having value 3 years down the road or something. So, these guys made this next one here. He's getting a lot of NFL draft buzz in the first round. Keon White, converted tight end. He spent a year at Old Dominion as a tight end, and then 2 years defensive lineman, 2 years at Georgia Tech as a defensive end. 6'5", 285. He's got a great frame, and he's super athletic, which, that's kind of what you're looking for at an edge rusher in today's NFL. Again, he's learning the position. He's converted tight end. He bounced around between a couple different programs. He's getting first-round buzz. So if he gets that draft capital, for whatever reason, he's probably something an eye on. Know the name in case something happens. But again, is he going to be a starter for someone right out the gate? I don't think so. And we are going to get right back to these last 2, which are going to be first 2 linebackers, actually. True linebackers, I think, that we're going to talk about right after this.
What's that? Your computer has another virus? Well, my friend, you need help to stop your obsession with the dirty O. All of this searching for air yards and yards after catch and blah, blah, blah. Stop your dirty O obsession by searching for the IDP Pro Players podcast instead, and focus on the other side of the balls. I mean ball. The crew on the IDP Pro Players podcast care about you and your technology by holding true to their no dirty O mantra. Every week, Gary and John bring you the IDP content you need to save your rosters and dominate your league while avoiding the dirty O. So save your technology by tuning into the IDP Pro Players podcast with your longtime and totally unoffensive veteran hosts, Johnny the Greek and Gary the IDP Tipster. Follow them on Twitter at I, D, P, RO. One word at the IDP Pro Players Pod.
So like I said, we're going into a couple linebackers here. hard to tell.
Give me one more time your second. This has already been a screwed up show, dude. All right. All right. So, you know what I mean? While you were gone, I paid commercials and commercials at work last week when I'm cut off like right in the middle. Just
oh, really?
You know what I mean? Yeah, this has been one of those mornings for me, folks. I'm sorry I brought it to the studio for you, Kraig, because we had a lot. We still got a lot of great information. And believe it or not, folks, Kraig, how many freaking podcasts or lives have we done together in the last few years? I don't know, 100 more? I don't know. It seemed like freaking 100, didn't it?
Yeah, we probably around there.
We did we did a lot. So believe me, we've done this before. I know you can't tell, but we have been sitting in these seats. All right. I got that off my chest.
These next two guys are probably going to be two of the first, I'd wager 3 or 4 linebackers taken in the draft. Whether or not they're first rounders, I don't know. Again, I don't think you're going to see a bunch. You might see 1 or 2 linebackers in the first round this year. But the sort of the big name that everyone's talking about is Jack Campbell. So he spent 1 year at Cincinnati and then 4 years at Iowa. One of his years at Cincinnati, or the only year he had, rather, was as a tight end. So he started at Iowa as a linebacker, then he went to Cincinnati to be a tight end. That didn't work, and then he came back to Iowa to be a linebacker again. He has a near perfect. He has a 9.98 relative athletic score, which is huge. I mean, it can tell you that he can just move around the field and do pretty much everything you want from that position. And you can see it from his accolades. I'm not going to read all of them off, but, unanimous first team All Big Ten. He won Nagurski Woodson Defensive Player of the Year, Butkus Fitzgerald Linebacker of the Year, Butkus Award, unanimous All-American. He could get you everything that he sort of would want. And the past 2 years, he's had 3.5 tackles for a loss and 1 sack each year, then 140 and 125 combined tackles. He's a guy that you could see going to a situation in the NFL draft and end up being a starter first year just because of, 1, his production, his athletic ability, and he's got size. He's 6'5", 243. He's not some of these smaller linebackers. Like there's a couple of them that might get swallowed up at the NFL level. So Jack Campbell's a guy that I really like. He's in the top 2, I'm pretty sure, of my own rookie linebacker rankings for, dynasty point of view. But again, if he goes to somewhere where he's not going to be a starter necessarily, not going to be learning year 1 value or redraft value, it's not going to be much. This next guy, and he's the last one we're going to talk about today, is a super interesting player. Drew Sanders. He spent 2 years at Alabama. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He was a great get for Alabama, and he barely played for them. His first 2 years, he was in a rotation. He was a special teams player, and then he transferred to Arkansas. He showed up at Arkansas this past year. He had 103 combined tackles, 13.5 tackles for a loss, and 9.5 sacks. And what they did at Arkansas, with him is they moved him all around, and they showed, and I think that's going to be really enticing for NFL teams, he is super versatile. He can be an inside linebacker for you. He can be an edge rusher for you. He's got size. He's 6'5", 230, so he probably has some weight to put on, but the guy can fly around. He can get around the edge. He can get you those tackles. He has the pedigree from not only at high school rating, but then what he came into as far as the programs in college and that production that he had. Drew Sanders is going to be at least, I would say, a day 2 pick. And I think he could have a shot to get on the field quicker than some of these other players because he has that versatility where it's not going to just be one thing he has to be pegged into and do. So Sanders, I'm pretty sure, is my number 1 pre-draft, linebacker for whatever that's all worth, just because of that versatility and that he can do it all, where Campbell's a guy who's going to get you tackles. Sanders is going to get you tackles, but he can also get you those big plays, which is awesome for IDP if he can hit that ceiling. Sort of like you said earlier, Gary, on Micah Parsons.
Nice.
And that does it for our round 1. Hopefully round 2 next week. We're going to try to get through another 12. Again, they're probably guys that might not even be round 1 in the NFL draft, but when you hear their names on that Friday or possibly even Saturday for the draft, you'll know who they were. Hear us talk about them here. Gary, hopefully everything's a little bit smoother next week as far as the world of electronics working with us.
Traffic isn't that far that way. That's where I'm heading.
Oh, don't do that. We'll be all right here. But thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll be seeing you next week.